Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. I'm in a very windy Salt Lake City, Utah. You can see how beautiful it is behind me. It seems like every direction you look in Salt Lake is this beautiful. I called on some of my friends that also have YouTube channels to answer some gardening questions. And what I ask of them is, what's a common gardening question that you get frequently on your channel? And they all sent me great answers and great content. So I've put it together here in a video. Let's get started.
Hi everyone, my name is Yulia and I garden in northern New Jersey, Zone 6. As a landscape designer, the most common question I get asked is how to create a low maintenance garden. So here are some ways you can create a beautiful garden without spending countless hours on it. Number one is choosing the right plants. If your plant requires full sun exposure, it will not have the best performance in the shade. On the other hand, if you plant a shade-loving plant out in the sun, it will scorch. So right plant, right place does work, and your plants will be healthier and happier and will require way less maintenance. Number two is to plant flowering shrubs and evergreens instead of annuals and perennials. First of all, you will need fewer plants, but also no deadheading, no dividing, and no weekly fertilizing. A lot of flowering shrubs and evergreens have all year round interest and also are amazing bird habitat. Number three, if you do plant perennial borders, plant them densely. Planting perennial plants thickly helps with weed pressure and also requires less mulching. Number four is to plant native plants. Although not all native plants are easy to grow, a lot of them are very low maintenance. For example, in my own garden, echinaceas are tried and true, have a very long season of interest, and practically carefree. Number five is to avoid invasive and aggressive species at all costs. So do your research to see if the plant that you selected will require more maintenance because of reseeding or spreading rapidly. Number six, if you like container gardening, select the largest container available so they don't dry out too fast and you don't have to water them every day. And finally, number seven, if you have a vegetable garden, install drip irrigation. Not only will save you time watering, but it's also way more efficient and it will save you water. And there you have it. With these tips and tricks, you can create a beautiful garden that is easy to take care of. Remember, it's all about smart planning and choosing the right plants.
Hi everyone, my name is Janie and my YouTube channel is called Dig, Plant, Water, Repeat. I live all the way across the country from Jim over in Northern California, and I garden in Zone 9B, so we get pretty hot here. First off, before I get started, I want to say a big thank you to Jim for thinking of me and including me. It is an honor. My family and I just moved to this new property that's about an acre in Northern California. It is rough. We are basically starting from scratch and I am making over this property and making over the landscape. I am a self-taught gardener. I have gone through the Master Gardeners program, so I do know a little something now, but I have just become obsessed with landscape plants and specifically flowers. So on my channel, Dig, Plant, Water, Repeat, you can watch me 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, as I work on this new property. I have some successes, I have some failures, but I always try and have fun. One of the main questions that I get on my channel is regarding annuals. Because I garden in Zone 9B, I have a pretty long growing season. My last frost is sometime in February, and my first frost is not till December. So I have a good 10 months of frost-free weather here. And I like to take advantage of that by planting annuals. So I think annuals give you the biggest bang for your buck. Once you plant them in the spring, they bloom basically all season long and give you color all season long. And I love that. The drawback to annuals are a lot of them will only last one season. So you have to keep replacing them every single year. The question that I get asked probably the most about annuals is, will that winter over for you in Zone 9B? And my answer is, it depends. I think the important thing is to understand the difference between a true annual and a tender perennial. A true annual is a plant that is going to go through its entire life cycle in one season, meaning you plant the seed, it grows up, It blooms and then it dies before the season is over. And that's it for that plant. It goes to seed and then you do it all over again the next year. A really good example of this is a Cosmo. Now contrast that with a tender perennial. Tender perennials are often called annuals at garden centers just for simplicity's sake. The reason why they're called annuals is the area where they are, the cold winter temperature is going to kill them. And so a lot of places will just call them annuals because of the weather. They're only going to last for 1 year. Now, if you live in a warmer weather environment like I do, these tender perennials might actually overwinter and might actually last for a couple seasons for you. It kind of just depends what plant you're talking about, basically how hardy that plant is, and what zone you live in. So for example, one of my favorite plants are petunias, specifically supertunias from Proven Winners. Supertunias are hardy usually down to a 10, zone 10, sometimes a zone 9B. So some petunias I can get away with overwintering, and then I get to enjoy them for multiple years. So even though they are considered an annual, they're actually a tender perennial for me in my zone. Another example of this is lantana. If you live in a cooler zone, say zone 5 or zone 6, you are going to treat a lantana as an annual. You're going to plant that lantana in the spring, and you know that lantana is going to die in the fall or winter. For us here in Northern California, zone 9B, and a lot of other places, I'm pretty sure, Jim, where you live as well, lantana is a perennial for us. Lantana lasts for years and years and years, and some people even grow and prune lantanas into little trees. So lantanas are tender perennials, but considering our climate, they are definitely perennials for us. So when someone asks me on my channel, will that winter over for you? My answer is always, it depends. And it has to do with, is it a true annual or is it a tender perennial? What is the hardiness zone of that tender perennial, if it is a tender perennial, and how cold are we going to get during the winter? So I hope that helps. For more content like this, head over to my channel, Dig, Plant, Water, Repeat, subscribe, and you will get 5 videos a week, Monday through Friday. Jim, thank you again for including me, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.
Hi, it's Jason here at Fraser Valley Rose Farm. We're a small-scale farm and nursery located in British Columbia, Canada, not too far away from Vancouver. We grow a lot of perennials, but what we really specialize in is roses, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Most common question I get here, both on the farm and on YouTube, is when should I be pruning my roses? And maybe the related question, which I'll touch on, which is when should I fertilize my roses? People know from reputation that roses are a high-octane shrub, high performance, meaning that an annual pruning to get rid of some of that old wood and to thin them out actually improves their performance, and they are kind of hungry as well. So people are not wrong in this, but the timing of that pruning may vary quite a lot based on your climate. So you have to ask yourself, are you in a harsh winter climate or are you in a very mild winter climate? Those of us who live in a harsher winter climate, and by this I mean that you get deep below freezing temperatures for any length of time, you're better to wait. Don't do your pruning now in the fall, don't do it over the winter, wait until spring, and in fact what I would say is cut out some of those activities right now. Don't do any deadheading, don't do any pruning, don't do any fertilizing right now, and up to about 6 weeks ahead of your first frost. That gives your roses a chance to settle down and harden off and get ready for the upcoming winter. When should you tackle it? Well, when you see the spring signs coming into the landscape. Things like the forsythia shrubs or the Japanese quince blooming are signs that life is returning to the landscape. When you look closely at your roses at that same time, you'll see that the red buds on their stems are starting to swell. That's a good indication that they're about to grow. At that time, what you should do is cut out any damage from the winter. That's those black stems, any dead, diseased, damaged crossing branches, and prune for shape and size. That's your activity. At that same time, if you want to replace the mulch around the base of your roses, put on some compost or manure to give them an early feeding into the season. I particularly like alfalfa pellets. Those do a good job as well. And then that should take care of it for the hard winter climates. Now, for those of you who were in those milder winter climates, and I'll use California as an example, classically, in this case, you actually do your pruning during the winter, either in December or January, when the temperatures are cooler and it's less stressful on the plant. And at the same time, you would do those same activities, prune for shape, size, and plant health, and replace that mulch and the manure or compost at the base of the plant. Well, there's always got to be an exception, doesn't there? And in this case, it comes in the form of the once blooming roses, things like ramblers, or also the old romantic roses of Europe, the kind you would have found in the garden of Empress Josephine, those things like gallicas, albas, and damask roses. They bloom on old wood first thing in the season, and so if you were to prune them now in the fall and winter, you will cost them that old wood and the blooms for the season. So the best thing for them is to wait until they finish blooming and then do your thinning and shaping at that point. Thanks for letting me answer the question of when you should prune your roses. And if you want more information on growing roses, any kind, drop into my channel, Fraser Valley Rose Farm. I'd be happy to help.
Hello all, my name is Linda Votter, aka Potager Blog on Instagram. You can also find me on YouTube. I garden in Oklahoma City at my 1930s cottage on the hill. I've gardened in Oklahoma, which is zone 7A, 7B, for about 30 to 35 years. And it's a pretty well visited garden. I get lots and lots of sightseers. It's been in a number of different publications. And I think one of the questions I get most frequently is, how do I attain what I like to think of as my signature look? So even at my new garden, people could drive by and I think it was instantly recognizable as my own. So I think that comes from a couple of things, but primarily from the way that I like to use tightly clipped forms, clipped boxwood, really any time of clipped evergreen, and then I juxtapose that against really beautiful cascading forms, either from annuals or from perennials or from blooming shrubs. And I think that tension between the two really gives me a highly recognizable look. I also think it's really practical because in Oklahoma, we can have some pretty severe weather extremes, but I can always rely on the clipped boxwoods and things to look good no matter the season. And I think that gives it a romantic quality. It gives it some architectural interest. And again, I just think it's very much a signature look that I hope is compelling and appealing, and it's certainly the way I like to garden.
So home base for the HortTube with Jim Putnam channel is actually in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B. If you've been following along with the channel at all, you know that. It was a big project we've been working on there for about 3 years. Going to be some changes in it this next year as well. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel to follow along with that content. One of the main questions I get on this channel is when to plant things. And so for me, as long as the ground is workable, and of course that might take out Zone 5 and parts of Zone 6, where you may have the ground be frozen. As long as the ground is workable, I'm planting as long as the plant is very, very hardy in my area. So fall is a great time to plant. Everybody that moves to the southeast, moves to Raleigh, they're immediately told fall is the best time to plant. And fall is a great time to plant, but I don't plant marginal things in the fall. So I'm not going to fall plant grasses, which can rot during the winter time. I'm not going to plant I'm in Zone 7B, and if the thing's barely hardy in my area or not quite hardy in my area on the tag, I'm not going to fall plant that so that it goes into its first winter while it's trying to establish itself. Those things I'm going to spring plant. So that's the only thing I'm monitoring. I will plant 12 months out of the year in Raleigh. As long as it's hardy, I'll do it during the fall and winter. If it's not a hardy thing, I'd want to spring plant it, or very hardy thing, I'd want to spring plant it so it has a whole spring and summer and early fall to get itself rooted in and prepared for that first winter. So that's what I think about when I'm asked that question, when is the best time to plant something? Really, for me, as long as it's hardy in your area and you can work the ground, the day that you feel excited about going out and gardening, that's the time to do it.
Hey there, HortTube gardeners. I'm Erin, the Impatient Gardener, and welcome to my garden. I'm here in Zone 5B, southeastern Wisconsin, and I do a lot of gardening on this space. I grow every kind of thing you can imagine, from vegetables to perennials to annuals to tropicals. You name it, I enjoy giving it a try and growing it. But being here in Zone 5, one of the things we have to start thinking about is winter. It is always on our mind, even in the middle of summer when we are hoping it doesn't come soon. And that really sums up one of the questions I get the most, which is how do I prepare my garden for winter? So generally speaking, most of the information that I provide about how to manage winter applies probably to zones 4 to 6, probably stretches a little bit into zone 3, but it's really important that your garden is ready for winter as we go into it, because winters can be really tough and it can really do a number on a garden. If you grow a lot of perennials, probably one of the questions that's on your mind is, should I cut back my garden in fall or should I cut it back in spring? So this is a subject of a lot of discussion, and I think it can actually get a little confusing. At the end of the day, it's your garden and you do what's best for you and what you choose. But there are some compelling reasons to not cut back your garden until spring, which is the tack that I take. So I think one of the best reasons to let everything stand, or most everything stand, for winter is that you have something to look at. So leaving some perennials stand can add some interest, some movement, something. It adds something to the garden in winter. It's also really good for establishing habitat in your garden. A lot of insects overwinter in plant material. Birds eat the seeds from plants. Other animals use them as cover or foraging. So there's a lot of reasons in terms of creating a good ecosystem in your garden that make it make sense to do that. From a purely sort of lazy standpoint, I'll just say if you cut your garden back in spring rather than fall, there's a lot less plant material to move around. It's lighter because it's all dried up. A lot of it's been used, some of it just breaks off on your own. The amount of work to clean up a garden in spring is much less than the amount of work it takes to clean it up in fall. And then the last reason to just sit tight, let your garden stand, is because it can actually be really good for your perennials. So it can really help protect the crown if there is snow. Snow is a fabulous insulator, so if you live somewhere where it snows and you leave a plant standing, snow will kind of collect around the crown, and that's a really good thing. It helps insulate that crown, protect it from frost, from freeze and thaw cycles, from the worst of the weather, and all that plant material kind of holds it in there. It also helps hold it in there so that when it does melt, it melts right onto the roots of those plants. Now, in terms of trees and shrubs, my main piece of advice actually applies to pretty much any zone, and that is make sure that your trees and shrubs are going into winter well watered. In particular, newly planted things, maybe things planted in the last year or two. Drought will stress a tree or a shrub more than most things will, and if you have an already stressed plant going into winter and then you get a tough winter, it can really be lights out for that. Now, if you're growing some shrubs that are sort of marginally hardy or like borderline hardy, hopefully you have sited these in a place that's kind of away from winter winds. Winter winds are really tough on plants, they're very drying. So hopefully you've kind of sited these in sort of a protected place. But if you need to add additional protection, and that might be like a wrapping of burlap around them to protect them from wind, or if we're talking about something like a macrophylla hydrangea, which can be kind of questionable in zone 5, zone 4, even into zone 6, if those buds are going to hold on old wood. They've already been created, but will they freeze off? Sometimes you can create kind of a cage around them and stuff them with a bunch of leaves. These are all things you can do to protect specific plants. If you need to do that with any of your plants, the time to do that is after the ground has frozen. The last thing you want to do is create a wonderful habitat for some mice to move in or some sort of other critter. So anything I'm going to do for in my area, I usually do those kinds of things after Thanksgiving. You really want that plant to be dormant, and it's generally not going to get cold enough to affect anything negatively before then. So that's when you want to go back and do some of your protect. If you live in an area where you've got deer or rabbit issues, make sure you are protecting your woodies, your trees, and your shrubs really well. For me, that means putting a collar around relatively newly planted or smaller trees and shrubs, which can protect against deer rubbing on it, can protect against rabbits scratching at it or chewing at it. In years when there's been a lot of snow, I have actually sustained damage quite high up on a trunk from rabbits because they stand on top of the snow and then go after the trunk. And sun scald is also an issue that we deal with in these cold zones. So for newly planted trees or trees that have like really thin bark, you can get something that kind of looks like a white tube that can go around them. That works well. Sometimes I just use some sort of deer mesh around the trunk of some of my trees that I'm worried about deer getting at. And I also will cage off entire trees just because I'm actually afraid that deer are going to get so hungry that they're going to come in there and start nibbling off on things. And I do keep up on my deer repellent all winter long because that's when they get very hungry. Like late winter, they start getting very hungry and they will eat things they might not normally do. So keep up on your animal protection. I do grow some trees and shrubs in containers in my garden, including this columnar apple that I planted this spring. Now, the method for how I overwinter these depends on a couple of factors. One, how hardy is it? Now, the general rule of thumb in terms of overwintering things in containers is that they should be 2 zones hardier than the zone you're in. So I'm in zone 5, they should be hardy down to zone 3 if I want them to overwinter outside. The other factor to take into consideration is how frostproof is your container that your tree or shrub is planted in. So last year I grew a couple of multi-stem birch trees in fiberglass containers. Those are hardy down to zone 3. I had no problem with those. I just moved those out of the way, actually put them somewhere else on the patio, put some Christmas lights, called it good. But there are other things I grow. This columnar apple, I grow some boxwoods in containers, and those boxwoods are probably questionably hardy, but the containers themselves are not at all. And those I put into an unheated garage. I throw a little bit of water on them maybe every 3 to 4 weeks, just a little bit to just keep a little bit of moisture in there. And then I bring them out pretty early in spring to let them acclimate slowly to the new conditions outside. So my fellow cold zone gardeners, I hope those tips helped you out. I am here with you. I know what it's like to get through this. Remember, the best thing about winter is that we get a break from our gardens, which means come spring, we are raring to go and we are ready to get out there.
Hey friends, it is Jenny with Gardening with Creekside. My husband Jerry and I own Creekside Nursery here in Dallas, North Carolina, Zone 7B. We are a grower retailer, meaning that we grow the plants that we sell. One of the biggest questions that we get from our customers is, how in the world do you deal with your red clay soil? Because we are blessed with beautiful North Carolina red clay. It's really easy. People overthink it, but red clay can actually work for you in your garden. Simply, all you need to do, some of the 2 biggest tips that I have to give you is do not plant your plants too deep. We like to say that your shrubs, your trees, your perennials, raise them up about 1 inch. That way the water sheds away from your plant and doesn't sit at the crown of the plant and rot it. So plant your plants a little bit high, and then you can come back with your mulch or your pine needles, whatever you like to use, and kind of hide that root ball so it doesn't look like your plants are kind of floating in your garden. Next, go ahead and amend your soil. Use that great compost. Use those aged pine bark fines. We want to give as much nutrition and organic material back into that red clay soil so that your plants are extremely happy and give you years and years of enjoyment. So if you are ever in Dallas, North Carolina, just west of Charlotte, come see us. We would love to see you. As always, happy gardening, friends.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Boissonneau, and I'm a gardener in southern New Jersey, Zone 7, about 10 minutes outside of Philadelphia. Jim, thanks so much for inviting me to share a bit about my garden with you all today. When I think of my most frequently asked garden questions, it usually comes down to the greenhouse you see behind me. My husband and I built it together about 2 years ago. It's by BC Greenhouses and it's the Parkside model. It's an 8x10, so it's the perfect size for my smaller garden space. It has allowed me to grow things throughout all seasons, plants and citrus and things that I've never been able to grow before. And I'd like to take a moment to just turn the camera around, get a better perspective, show you some of the custom features that my husband and I added, and some of the ways I'll be transitioning some of my plants in there over the winter. I have a few trees in pots I'll be bringing in real soon. I've got a Calamandan orange here. You can see some little fruits on it. And then this is a dwarf fig from Southern Living called Little Miss Figgy. And then I've got an olive here that I'm training into a standard topiary form and kind of limbing it up there. That'll be going in as well. Welcome to my greenhouse. When you first walk in, you'll see my favorite feature. It is a sink that my husband and I DIY'd this past summer. And let me tell you, I use this every day. It has just been wonderful to have access to running water in here. It currently works for spring, summer, and fall, but we will look to putting some frost-proof piping so I can use it in the winter as well. So I will need to winterize it this year. But it started out, I found this cast iron sink on Facebook Marketplace, and it was so cheap, could not pass it up. And then my husband built this sink base for me with the storage and the shelves. It's just been fantastic. I hooked up the plumbing myself. We love to DIY around here, and then I like to think that the money we save with DIY, I can then roll back into the plant budget. I love how that works. So both sides work, but it's only cold water in both sides, and that's all I need. And then it drains down into a galvanized watering can, where I'm then able to reuse that gray water in the garden or in the greenhouse, wherever I need it. Got a little collection of some pots here with myrtle, topiaries, amaryllis, and some hellebores. Those bloom in the winter, and it's really beautiful out here. And just a little bubbler for that kind of zen moment. Also adds some nice humidity and moisture into the air as well. Gets hot in here over summer, so I do run a little fan if I'm in here, and then I've got 3 vents and a large vent in the back that open up automatically when the temperatures get too hot. One thing I've been doing lately is clipping as many dahlias as I can. You know, their season is coming to an end, and that's another way that I love to use the greenhouse. In early spring, I will pot up my tubers, bring them inside the greenhouse, and I can kind of get them a jump start and get them growing a little bit sooner, so that way I can enjoy them and prolong my dahlias as long as possible. So that's one thing I love to do in the greenhouse. You can see I've got some oranges on my Calamandan orange out the window. I remember last year picking oranges while the snow was coming down in here, and it was just really such a beautiful moment. I love England and cottage style and all the whimsy and things like that. So that's kind of what I have going on in here. It just makes me feel really good and really productive to garden in here. This is my little workstation where I will plant my seeds, start my seeds. I've got a soil blocker here and various little pots and things. I don't have any seeds started right now. I'm working more on planting bulbs and getting everything ready, transitioning into winter right now. But I've got a little speaker. I listen to some music. So for those extra cold nights, I wanted to show you my little greenhouse heater. I really only run this at about 40 in the evenings when it's really cold, just to kind of take the chill off. Things do great in here. I've been able to keep my citrus and everything going over the winter at those temperatures. During the day, I don't need any supplemental heat, even in the winter, because it is still quite warm. I've got the maples up above right now that provide nice shade in the summer, but then of course they're going to be losing their leaves, and then the sun can just cascade in and warm up the greenhouse in the winter, and it works out perfectly. But that's it. That's just a little quick overview of my greenhouse. I really love it, and it has given me just a whole new opportunity to grow and try new things. If you have any questions, I'd love to connect with you. I'm at How's It Growing NJ on Instagram, How's It Growing on Facebook and on YouTube. Jim, thank you once again for including me in this great video with some amazing gardeners, and I hope everybody is out there enjoying their gardens right now. Thanks so much.
So thank you guys very much for watching this video, and thanks to all of my all-star guests for participating in the video. I've met about half the group face-to-face, and about half the group I have not met face-to-face, and I really would like to do that over the next few years, visit with everyone. But I enjoy my visit, you know, with Creekside and Linda Vodder recently, if you want to go back and take a look at those videos. I got a surprise. One other person in this video is about to be in future content as well. Thank you guys for watching.